I think I knew by that time that although Baba loved me, and I think maybe even a bit especially, still I was not all that special to him. And if this was true for me, it just had to be true of the other people who love Baba also. That Baba is deeply involved in these major parts. And of course, the second thing that totally stunned me, I realized for the first time that until then I had always assumed that anything to do with dollars and cents, balancing budgets and professional life, I'd always thought automatically had to be excluded from one's spiritual life and aspirations. That was filthy money and just the way that we tried to keep body and soul together. And I guess I must have thought that really our spiritual life was in our family life and our studies and maybe a group, things of that sort. But suddenly realized, I thought to myself, my God, Stevens, how stupid can you be? How could the avatar in charge of creation and getting humanity through these tough things involved with our samskaric patterns, how can he be so inefficient as to neglect, leave aside 8, 10, 12 hours a day if you're a workaholic, and only utilize time outside of that? Well, it just couldn't be. I mean, he should be fired from the board if he lets things go along that inefficiently in creation. I just had to realize that. Okay, Billy, we're still here, honey boy. So, this put such a tremendously different cast on things. And it wasn't terribly long after that, 1966, my mother died, who had met Baba. And when I wrote to Baba, I wrote that my mother had died, and she had enjoyed tremendously knowing him. She had met him in San Francisco and immediately had attracted. She's what I always call a great Baba admirer. She was a devout Christian. She loved Jesus Christ, but she recognized a man of enormous dimensions in MeherBaba. She loved him, she was attracted. Baba said, this is a very good woman. This is why you're born into this family. So, when she died, I wrote to him that she had died. I got to India 3-4 months after that, and as soon as I sat down, I saw that Baba was not in his usual good, loving, expansive mood. And I wondered, what's happened? Did somebody cross him up with one of the Mandali, done something terrible, and now I've inherited the thundercloud when I arrived? And so we went on for a few minutes, and maybe 15 minutes. All of a sudden, Baba looks at me and he does his gesture, and Eric translates, Don, why didn't you send Baba a telegram when your mother died? Well, I hadn't expected this. It was totally unexpected. And so I quickly looked around. I tried, first of all, to be honest with myself. Well, Don, why didn't you? And of course, the first thing that popped into my mind is because my mother had trained me to be a great penny catcher like herself, and so I didn't make unnecessary expenditures. But then I thought, well, that was pretty important. No, I don't remember thinking that. And then I knew the answer, suddenly and immediately. I said, well, really, Baba, finally, after all these years, there's one thing that I realize totally and deeply, and that is, you are God, and you know everything. And, when I said this, I knew two things instantly. I knew I'd said the truth. Really, this is exactly the way I felt. And the second thing I knew instantly was that if I had ever said anything that ought to please Baba, that ought to be it. So, I was feeling all nice and diplomatic about this, thinking Baba would reach over and pat me on the back, And he gave a great big smile and he said, yes, this is true. And so we went on to another subject. I heaved a deep sigh of relief. Boy, I'd been rather tense for those 15, 20 minutes. I said, well, we got through that one, didn't we, Steve? But you know how Baba is. You just think you breasted the thing and gotten through the worst. And all of a sudden, he looked seriously at me again. He said, yes, Tom, but about your mother. Yes, it is true. Baba is God. Baba does know everything. That is absolutely true. But You and I are here in physical form, in creation, and we live subject to the limitations of creation. Now mind you, he did not say that Don lives under the physical limitations. He put both of us there. And he said, Don, your responsibility to me is each time that something important, then he and Arish had quite a conversation, and Arish amended that. No, not just something, anything very important happened, but even something, a medium importance, by the most ready, apt means of physical communication. Physical communication, let me know what has happened. You know, that was an amazing statement. And for some reason or another, I felt I was just absolutely right. And I did that for the remaining months of Baba's existence. And then, when he dropped his body, the first important thing that happened to me, all of a sudden, I had this reflex of making my report to Baba. And for some reason or another, I knew instantly that his dropping the body did not affect that command. In some way, I must do it. But you know, sending a telegram or a special delivery letter to Meherazad for MeherBaba, it didn't make much sense. Probably the Mongoli would say, well, Don, are you crazy? What's going on here? So I thought a message to him. And 3 or 4 weeks later, another thing, and for some reason I had the instinct of saying the thing within myself, thinking it wasn't on, and I did it out loud. And immediately things began to happen very rapidly. I'm sure I've told that part of the story here. And so I adopted the practice of talking, making my reports out loud. I made the reports to Baba as he said to do it. And I knew instinctively that that order continued after he dropped the body. I felt it was a responsibility, and I found out empirically that doing it out loud had enormously intensified the vitality of that report to Baba. Anyway, so I continued to do that. So that brings us then, with that background established while Baba was still in the body, that was a certain framework. And I saw the reality of that, the importance. So you see, Baba was involved in my original professional life, and I quickly found out in all aspects of my life how deeply involved he was. And secondly, it was my responsibility periodically to make a definite, concrete effort to be in touch with it about my daily practical life and things going on. That set the stage. Remind you constantly what Baba would say in front of me when somebody new would come in that would come up in conversation. He would say one thing always: you think you selected and found Baba, and you found and selected Baba. No, it's the reverse. Baba found and selected you. This is the reality. This is true. So this is what is true of you. And what I found out has to be true, not just for Don in those circumstances. It has to be true, living reality for the people that Baba selected. You wouldn't be sitting here if Baba you hadn't come to his attention because of your merit, and he selected you because he said you have earned the avatar himself to help you in the next phases. So let's go into the 24 hours. What was it? Very late in January, wasn't it? What, the 31st, I think it was.
Yes.
And so, actually, as he dropped his body on the 31st, this then was the 1st of February. I'd gone to bed. It was Friday, as usual, in the office. A mess. LXs and a lot of things undone, and people calling from San Francisco, and God knows where at the last minute, because they say, oh gosh, the office will be closed for 2 days, and we've got to get this straightened out now. So we go home. I was in London at the time, and I was really beat. So I went to bed good and early. First thing I knew, I was almost sitting straight up in bed, and the phone was ringing. And forgive me, but this is the way I work. I said, God damn it, that false alarm. Calling me in the middle of the night from San Francisco again. And so I go out and find the phone, and I look at my watch, and it's a little after 5 o'clock in the morning. And that made sense because he never knew how to add 8 or 9 hours to San Francisco time. You know, a brilliant man, I hope this never gets back to him, by the way, but a brilliant man like that who couldn't add up these hours, and he would keep doing it. And so there we were, so I pick up the phone and say hello. Nobody says hello. That's a little strange. And so I say hello again, and then I hear something like that, you know, some funny sort of snuffling and something that sounds maybe like a pig somewhere grunting in the distance, but it sounded totally inhuman. And so I thought it was a nut on the phone. You know, that happens every once in a while in the phone system. So I say hello again and pause, and then I think I hear 2 words. I'm not sure. He's gone. But not announced so I can really hear it. So I repeated, who's gone? And then there was sort of a silence and some more snuffling and so on. The voice said more distinctly, he's gone. And I recognized that it was Delia Delian in London. I said, but Delia, who's gone? She said, Bob is gone. This was absolutely impossible. You know, I was totally stunned. The last thing I was prepared for. Yes, we had known for months or even years at that time that Baba was, you know, had serious physical problems. But he'd had these problems for a long time, and he would bounce back up whenever he had a visitor. He'd be smiling and pink-cheeked and his pink coat on, you know, and greet you warmly and so on. And the Mandali would say, but now look, Baba has a way of putting this on when somebody comes in that he loves and he wants to be warm and reassuring to him. They said, you should see Baba after the visitor disappears. And he just sinks down and he is so weary and so much in pain and so on. But one hears these stories months after months after months, and here's Baba sending out all these letters and making the plans for the gatherings, the different groups that are supposed to arrive in the spring months, 2-3 groups at a time, and how he will greet them. My God, you know, this has been planned for 6-8 months by that time, everybody involved. And suddenly, to have the news that Baba isn't there, it's incomprehensible. I think Dee and I exchanged 2-3 more sentences. The story was that Baba had dropped his body roughly midday the day before. One of the Mandali had called Adi Jr., excuse me, who was living in London at the time with his family. That was in the early hours of the next day. No, late that day, but our early hours. It was still the same day there, but early our day. And then Delia, he had called Delia, and then Delia called me. So after that, I hung up, Delia hung up. The next thing I knew, I was sitting on the edge of my bed in my bedroom. Not a thought, no sense of sadness. It was incredible. As much as I loved Baba, there was not the slightest tinge. No tears, nothing of the sort. Suddenly, I sort of came to consciously, and I knew instantly, I've got to go. I've got to be there. Not terribly. I've never been to a funeral in my life, quite frankly. Even when my own mother died, I didn't go to the grave. I don't know why, but I knew this time I had to see Baba again. So here we are, early Saturday morning. At that time, very largely still, Americans have to have a visa, which has to be applied for in London through the High Commissioner of India's office. If you were in a hurry, emergency, it was sent by telegram, which you paid for, of course. And if you were lucky, you would get a reply by telegram from Delhi, from the Foreign Office, in 48 hours. That was midnight. So, unfortunately, I also knew that on the weekend, the High Commissioner of India's office was closed up, but it wouldn't be open again officially until Monday morning. Well, what do you do? I mean, how much have you been around, Baba? You don't stop with a problem like that. You don't. Baba would never allow you to stop. I've seen him push the mandala in a fashion that was incredible. What you would expect them to overcome in the way of tremendous difficulties. You know, you just didn't say, well, if it's Baba's will, there it is. And then say, okay, now let's get on with something else. No. You have impossible ideas, you do impossible things. So I said, well, to myself, maybe there will be somebody who is a duty officer down at the High Commissioner's office. But even before I go there, I'm going to go by American Express, which always handled my itineraries for the company. And I knew very well the head of the department, of the travel department, Rod, old friends. He'd arranged several trips back up into India for me, so he knew the name Meher Baba. He knew it well. Very sympathetic to Meher Baba. Not a Baba lover, but great Baba admirer. So I said, well, I'll go to Rod's office first, and then I'll try the High Commissioner. 9 o'clock, go up the stairs to Rod's office on the 2nd floor. And there he is, behind a stack of papers, working away. He looks around, he sees me, and he said, Don, what are you doing here early on a Saturday morning? And I said, Rod, I've got a crisis, and I need your help. So he looked at me and said, what's up? And I said, Meher Baba died. I didn't say anything about dropping body or, erudite things like that. I just said he died. He said, it's impossible. I said, no, he died. He's been ill, but we didn't expect him to die. And he just suddenly died yesterday, not in a day. And he said, and you've got to go. I said, yes, I've got to go. He said, well, there's a flight today for India, of course. In fact, non-stop to Delhi. I think it continues to Bombay. We can get you on that some way. Don't worry about that. But he said, the visa, that's the problem. And I said, yes, I know. And I said, I know also that the High Commissioner's office is closed today. He said, yes, maybe there will be a duty officer. He said, do 2 things now. Go down there and ring the bell and insist there has to be somebody in the place. They just can't leave that huge place empty for the whole weekend. So find out if there isn't somebody, and if there's nobody on duty, see if they can telephone to the country and get somebody to send an emergency request. And he said, if, however, that fails completely, then go to Air India office. He said, I don't know what it would be, but there's every chance that they've got some kind of an emergency arrangement for humanitarian purposes, for emergencies of this sort, and see what they can tell you. So I thought, good old Rod. He's probably right there. I felt that I couldn't have better advice. Down to the High Commissioner's office, down Haymarket, get down to the Strand, and around the little corner, and here's these great big wooden doors, absolutely closed. No lights in any windows anywhere. You know, just looks absolutely dead and desolate. So what do? Well, you go over, you pull on the bell. You know, it's not one of these push bells, it's one of these pull bells. And you can hear it ringing for God knows what distance way back in the corridors. And I heard it, and I didn't hear anything moving. And I ring it. Maybe I ring it for 10 minutes, and then suddenly I sort of hear sliding of some sort of sandal on a polished stone, you know, hear it coming through. Oh my God. If that's the High Commissioner, he must be absolutely half dead. He's not going to do anything. But finally, this shuffling gets up, and the door slowly parts, and here's a little old bent fellow with white hair, you know, and he looks as if he's about 95 years old, and his head's sort of bobbing around this way, a little bit more than, you know, they usually do. He's a very good expert at it. And he wants to know what I want, and I said, I've got an emergency. I've got to get an emergency visa to go to India because a close friend has died. And he said, High Commissioner not here today, he's away for the weekend. I said, yes, I'm sure, but there must be a duty officer. No, duty officer in country 2. And so he's shaking his head, you can't tell whether it's no or yes, you know. Just keeps waggling around this fashion. It's all wonderful, but absolutely hopeless, you know. And I tried one or two other approaches and the same waggling and smiling, you know, but nothing to be done about the whole thing. So I finally realized I'm not going to punch through any miracle in this barrier. So he closes the door and I go out and do the incredible thing of hailing a taxi, and I never spend money like that, you know, but in an emergency, why you do what's necessary. Took the taxi up to Bond Street to Area in the office. It's on a corner, and the door faces out onto the corner, a great big double one, at least it was at that time. I open up and go in. Inside, in sort of a half-moon arrangement, is a wooden thing which is broken up into individual little desks, a slot here that goes back to a door, through the back wall to the sort of rabbit warren offices that the individuals, the storage for paper, supplies, all those things, and the rest of the half-moon with other people. People sitting everywhere but on one, right next to the little slot opening. So I take this all in, you know, in 1 second as I walk in. And just as I walk in, the back door to the rabbit warren opens, and really a superb, magnificent Indian woman in a beautiful sari walks out. She looks at me, I look at her, and just somewhere or another, she knew and I knew that something had to be done. She beckons to me. I come up. She seats herself at the one empty place right next to the little opening, and as she sits down, she motions for me to sit down in front of her. And as I sit down in front of her, feeling so happy to have immediate attention by a goddess like this,